So, hi everybody, and welcome to episode 110 of Level Up, 60 minutes of live Q&A, where your questions and votes really do drive the show. A warm welcome to everybody. Please do let Adriana, she's our social team for today, know your name and the city from where you are joining, whether you're on LinkedIn or on YouTube. It'd be great to introduce yourselves, please. And we do love, of course, to get everybody involved. Adriana will post a link into the chat so that you can vote up the questions that you would most like answered. And of course, to add your own to the list, which has been pre-submitted. If your question is selected, then of course your name will appear in the credits at the end of the show. So do get yours in early and stay with us to see all of that happen. Please take a moment as well, if you wouldn't mind, to like, comment, share and subscribe. It really doesn't cost you anything, and it does help new people to discover our content on each platform. So we'd be very grateful if you wouldn't mind doing that. Today, as the world faces a sharp inflection point in the economy, securing our futures as individuals, teams, and organizations is really vital. So how do we become part of the solution rather than part of the problem? As an agent for good, an agent for change, and in particular, how can we manage to do that really well if we're working in an agile environment where the full journey is often a little less clear as to what those twists and turns are going to be like. Joining us today, we've got a really good panel. So let's jump straight in and meet them. Farah HEBA is a product owner and trainer over at Aedger, and having developed strong skills in digital project and product management, she works across Europe and North Africa to really elevate the achievements of all of her clients. Welcome back to Level Up, Farah. Lovely to see you again.
Hi, Nick. Hi, everybody. Really delighted to be here with you today and looking forward to answering the questions that really seem great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Louisa Leung is the managing partner over at Lifting Lanterns. She's based in Perth in Western Australia. She is, of course, a passionate coach and mentor working across industry to deliver outstanding quality to her clients and lift their game. So, Louisa, welcome back to Level Up. Great to see you.
Thanks, Nick. It's also a Friday night for us, and it is 11:11 today, so lest we forget. And a 4-year-old puppy. My 4-year-old made the puppy today, so I thought I'd make an appearance of it.
Okay, well, that's really wonderful, and thank you so much for doing that. It's a lovely thing to do, and it's a fantastic opportunity for all generations to come together, isn't it? And remember and think and reflect on, the times that other people had to self-sacrifice so that we had the benefits and the privileges that we all enjoy today. So thank you, Louisa. Welcome back to the panel. Dianne Rampadarath also returns today. She's, of course, the Assistant Director over at the Public Service of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Dianne works with a whole range of different organizations delivering agile programs of work around things like sustainable rural development and so on. So, Dianne, welcome back to Level Up. Lovely to see you.
Thank you very much, Nick, and APMG International for again the opportunity to appear on the panel. And just a quote I'd like to contribute to today's topic: it's not the strongest nor the most intelligent of species that survive, but the ones that most adaptable to change. Thank you.
And indeed, and during the COP27, never has that been truer. At the moment in the UK, we're having record temperatures, warm temperatures in our November, the kind of temperatures that typically in my country we would get in spring, in late May. So many of the trees and the plants in my garden are just totally confused. Just so, what should I be doing? Where are the insects? The insects are not there. So there's no point in, making another flower or anything like that, but they're very confused. And it's a really important thing for us to bear in mind. So thank you, Dianne. Patrick joins us. Patrick von Schlag is, of course, the president over at the Deep Creek Center in the US, where their focus is on helping organizations adopt and adapt best practice frameworks. Patrick's insight and humanity allow him to get the very best out of all of the teams that he works with. Welcome back to Level Up, Patrick. Great to see you.
Hi, Nick. It's great to be back. Thank you for having me back again.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Completing our panel today is Falko Werner. He's the co-founder and the Agile coach over at Vempio, where he helps leaders double the effectiveness of their teams in a matter of a few weeks. With a background in IT engineering, he always baselines his guidance on proven techniques and methods. So welcome back to the panel, Falko. Lovely to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you too. I'm looking forward to today's episode and hope you don't have a burning platform.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, thank you. Our question master for today is joining us from South Wales. Oh, she is, of course, Shanice Mitchell-Cox. Lovely to see you again, Shanice. What's happening in your world? Are you basking in, kind of Saharan type temperatures, or what's happening to the weather where you are?
Hi, Nick. Yeah, no, it's not very sunny here, I'm afraid. It's very overcast and has been all week. So not sunny Wales today, bit of a miserable Wales.
Okay, all right then. Well, nonetheless, I'm sure that the water and the precipitation will be most welcome. All right, very good. Thank you very much indeed. So great to have you all on board, panel. Let's go over to our questions, Shanice, if we may, and take on our first question of the day.
Of course, thanks, Nick. So we've got a question from Samantha. How can I adapt my traditional change management practices to an agile environment? What are the key points I need to consider?
All right, so it's a really good question. Farah, why don't you start us off and then we'll hear from Dianne.
So, first, what I would say to Samantha would be that you need to understand how does Agile differ from what we have looked at in the past when it comes to change management. And by this, I mean frequency of change, user adoption of changes, the fact that we are having a faster pace. Then there are some practical things that you can do, like ensuring that the change team attend the regular Agile ceremonies and adopt the Agile ways of working and codes, that you learn how to identify and prioritize activities, I would say, according to business value, or even, I would say, strengthen the delivery team knowledge in regards to the value to the application of change management.
It's a really good point that you make, because I think as change managers, we often like certainty, and there's a little more variety when you're trying to figure all of that out in an agile environment. So really good start for us. Thank you so much, Farah. Dianne, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Patrick.
So some of the key points in the agile transformation process to ensure that it's successful would be training of staff so that they're aware of the agile methodologies and technique, as well as ensuring there's continuous collaboration and communication with staff so that they are aware of what is happening in the organization. So having collaboration and having close communication with employees can ensure that your agile transformation occurs successfully.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Dianne. Keeping up those comms is super important and really, really relevant. And I want to come back to that in a few minutes, but let's hear from Patrick next, please.
So one of the challenges that organizations struggle with in traditional projects, they're thinking about a whole laundry list of specific deliverable items. And in an agile approach, of course, we may not know exactly what those deliverables are going to look like. But what we do have to have is a shared vision. What are we trying to win together? What are the desired outcomes the organization is trying to achieve? And so as change managers, your ability to get all of these people on the same song sheet in terms of the overall business goals and objectives of the Agile transformation is critical, because the specific details are going to move around a lot. But we need to have something that will serve as our North Star.
North Star is such an important thing, isn't it? If you can avoid, it's one of the ways in which I think, when I'm not a very good sailor, so I try and avoid feeling too seasick by focusing on the horizon. And the North Star principle is very important, a kind of, direction of travel for you as a change manager. Falko, what are your thoughts on this about adapting to work in a more agile environment?
Yeah, when you're asking the question of when you come from traditional change management to agile change management, it's, from my point of view, getting from the top down, also bottom-up approach, and combining them. So listening to people is one of the most important things. So that's part of the communication process in both ways to be able to be more agile.
Thank you so much indeed. Louisa, your thoughts?
So Nick, I think people get very hung up on using change in Agile or using change in Waterfall. The key part of this question is about how to adapt those change management practices. And the competency itself is still the same, irrespective of whether you're doing an Agile project or whether you're doing a Waterfall project. You still have to think about the vision. You still have to think about your comms. You still have to think about how to bring people on the change journey. The difference about bringing what you used to do traditional projects into an Agile world is just the timing of it. The frequency is a lot regular. The timing is, you have to look at it a bit different, as well as just seeing who and how many people you're going to need to help you on this change journey.
I think that's a really valid comment to make, Louisa. I suppose one of the challenges for us is that you need to try and wean yourself off from having the answers for people and genuinely helping them manage the change rather than necessarily knowing the answer, if that makes sense. Because from a communications point of view, often the temptation is to tell people what the answer is, okay, or to sell the solution to them. Whereas actually, a lot of the time, what we should be doing is we should simply be explaining it, if that makes sense. So there's a difference there in the way in which you go about things so that you avoid setting a trap for yourself almost on the communications planning and allowing things to be able to evolve and to resolve over time and become clearer and clearer. So very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. And thank you to Samantha for an excellent first question. She actually cheekily managed to put two questions in one there. So very well done on that. Let's move on if we can. And if you're watching online, and I can see many of you are, please do submit your question into the chat and we'll pick it up and we'll bring it over to the panel. Shanice, let's take our next question, please.
Of course, thank you. So we've got a question from Rachel. Do you have any tips for improving communication in an organisation? This seems to be key in any change rollout and even more so when working in an agile way.
Okay, Patrick, start us off and then we'll hear from... Patrick, start us off. Thank you very much.
So one of the things that I see in a lot of my customer environments is that when people start thinking about who the stakeholders are and what the communications models should look like, they begin with an exclusionary approach. Who do we not need to engage? Who do we not need to provide vehicles or information for? And I think that that's almost exactly backwards. What you're really trying to do is assess who are all the people who can contribute perspective, who can have appropriate visibility into what we're doing, and who can help us learn and adapt. So it's actually a very important part of this to think about stakeholders first, like we always do in any project journey, but to try to cast that net as wide as possible.
Thank you so much. Farah, your thoughts? Then we'll hear from Louisa.
Thank you, Nick. So indeed, when working in an agile way, there are two things that you need to foster. There is communication and there is trust, and they go along. So to improve communication, you can encourage questions, encourage the team to ask questions, and let's say never dismiss a question or make someone feel bad for asking a question. You can encourage feedback, and you can start on your own by giving feedback often and to everybody. And of course, and the last but not the least, you need to consider the culture of people, because we're seeing that teams are more and more consisting of people that are coming from different regions, cultures, and backgrounds. So pay attention to the communication channels you use and how you communicate, as people would react, behave, and understand things really differently.
Absolutely right. Some fantastic insight there. Really, really good. Thank you so much. Louisa and then Dianne.
Don't use email. That's just the insider's thing, is that everyone thinks email is comms. You've sent an email out and you've done comms. I'm on a project and I've sent an email and I've communicated. Why has no one known about this project? I think it's quite important for a change agent, change managers, anyone to think about change, to use any other piece of comms than email. That aside, I think it's important to think about your audience that you're communicating to, because different audiences are going to want their channel that Farah was just mentioning in a different way. Some people want to hear it from a team meeting. Some people want to read it in a newsletter. Some people want to hear it from a big meeting, et cetera, et cetera. There are different ways that people want to take on the communication. So you should be targeting your communication channels to your audience.
That's so important, isn't it? We imagine, because we've sent something, that not only has it been read, but also it's been understood. And there's a very big difference, even if somebody's read it, that they have arrived at the same understanding that the originator, of that email might have had. So really good advice. Thank you so much. Dianne, and then we'll hear from Falko.
So just two additional points to what all the other panelists have said. In the communication process, to just be open and transparent, as well as organizing like team building activities so that all staff members and all stakeholders are continuously involved in the communication process.
Thank you very much indeed. Falko, your thoughts?
I also just want to add a minor thing when I remember reading a book from John Cotter about that, is that you're often underestimating the communication reach of what you do. So what he said is, if you communicated 3 times more than you initially expected, you're usually just a third of the way there. So 9 times is a good thing to do. And that's also fitting to the different channels. So keep in mind, some people just read Slack or Teams or whatever, chat communications. Others really like to be in touch. Personal is always best. So an agile thing is Festo face-to-face communication over everything else. So if there is a way to do town halls, either in person or digital, you spread a lot of word, but repeating is key.
Yeah, it's so important. This engagement is key, really, isn't it? Because communication is not broadcast. Broadcast is just kind of one way, and what you're really looking for here is engagement, and response and reactions, and to help tune the messaging kind of as you go as well, so that you really start to for it to be matching, not just what it is that you want to say, but also the tone of voice is going to be super important. And it's very, very difficult to do that simply in text. Much easier to do it in person, even if that in person is using, tools that allow you to speak with people in other locations, in other geographies and other business cultures and so on. So really good to try and do that. I think, panel, one of the challenges in being able to do that is that, often people who are more senior in organizations don't necessarily have the communications background and training that they really need in order to be able to help with major transformational change. How much time do you spend on coaching those key contributors, those execs, if you like, or not necessarily the most senior people in the organization, but the ones who are leading the change initiative themselves? Is that something that you find that you need to invest in to be able to improve outcomes, Patrick?
It's essential. and it's often in very short bursts. So if you try to plan like you're going to have one shot at engaging these folks and trying to get your message across, you're not going to create the behavioral change that you want. Right? Similar to the persistence message that we were just talking about related to communication structures, you have to help the senior people understand that it's perfectly appropriate to have a common vision, but the actual path we're going to end up taking to achieve that vision, nobody knows right now. And a whole bunch of the things that we do know we're actually wrong about anyway. So how do we help start the journey and create the feedback loops that we need? Thinking about communications two-way this way is really important too, right? So I'm not just interested in what I want to say out. What do I want people to know? What do I want people to think or do? Or how do I want them to feel? But how do I get feedback on what's working, what's not working, what else? Right? And so getting them to open themselves to that feedback loop is really critical.
Okay, thank you so much. Falko, what's your experience of this in coaching people to do this?
I would agree to answer. It's a communication process. It usually takes quite a while to get those people who are on the executive level to understand. And often the best way to do that is by example. So having a change leader that you hopefully can coach for a longer time, then create first wins and market them. Get them known in the organization, see the results that you created, and then build upon those step by step. Take the time that change needs. So you can always put change on top of people, but the best thing is that you create the way to where you want to go together with them. So involve them and not give, as you said, the answer ahead, but let the people who need to change to reach the goals of the organization or whatever we're talking about, we want to change, try to get them to evolve to the correct or to the goal that is valuable for the organization, for the people inside the organization. So actually all the stakeholders. When we talk about stakeholders, even each of the employees is a stakeholder in the organization, as our users, our managers, our shareholders.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll probably come back to that thinking in a few moments or so. But in the meantime, let's move on if we can. And I think Shanice will take our next question, if we may.
Yeah, we've actually got a live question from Etienne, a LinkedIn viewer. Does the frequency of deployment in Agile projects result in more or greater change fatigue?
That's a really good question, Etienne. Thank you for bringing it up, because the pace at which sprints deliver new functionality, new capability into organizations can be quite relentless, really, can't it? Plus, it's also about managing people's expectations, I imagine, from when they think they might be getting something which is meaningful for them, but actually the development team are taking a little longer to get to that point, that tipping point, if you like, for them. So I do think that sometimes, the frequency of development and deployment is an influencing factor, but it can be managed and mitigated if you're able to place it into a cadence, a heartbeat, if you like, that your organization is expecting. If it's expecting high frequency, relatively modest delivery deltas, then that's one thing. If it's expecting very high delivery deltas, then of course it's quite another. Louise, what's your experience of this? And then we'll hear from Farah.
I actually do think it is greater change fatigue. But I think that's just society overall these days. We're getting updates on our mobile phones, on our laptops, on everything much quicker than we ever used to. So we are getting change forced upon us at a much faster rate. And I guess it's for an organization to look at things like a heat map, to look at how much change is going on, and to be mindful that people can only take on about 2-3 major changes at a time. So if your deployments are only doing minor changes, not too much of a problem. But if you're looking at doing major changes and you're doing major changes on top of major changes, people will start to ignore some of the things that you're putting in. And so the change won't end up being successful anyway. They won't even take it on. So beyond the fatigue, it's just the fact that humans can actually only take on so much change at a time. So heat maps, definitely something to consider. And if people get into a rhythm, as you were just mentioning, Nick, if people get into a rhythm, they won't actually feel like it's change upon them. They'll actually be looking forward to something new that's coming in.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's so important, isn't it, to try and tune that rhythm to the cadence of the organization. You know, you need to, it's always a good bedside manner to check the pulse of the patient, isn't it? And try and match that energy if you can do. Really very good indeed. Thank you so much. Farah, your thoughts on this? Then we'll hear from Patrick next.
Well, really good question, and it might be the case. Well, I've seen a lot of agile projects and agile teams that are overwhelming users changes after changes and not considering the feedback that they may have. So my, let's say, feedback on this would be, as a change manager or a change agent, choose the right frequency to avoid that overwhelming. Because yes, short iterations are good for delivery, but you're not obliged every time to push in production all the changes at the same time. There are also moments that you need to point out when the user are not ready to receive the change, on when there is a risk of low customer adoption. So you need to find out what are these moments and to figure out if you can push the changes maybe later on or consider another timing. What I would add, and this is my last point, would be get feedback from the people. Try to understand where does the fatigue come from, and if they are, let's say, there are any ways that will help you to avoid it for next times.
Thank you very much indeed. Some great advice there. Thanks so much, Farah. Patrick, your thoughts on this?
Some really great comments from the other panelists. One of the things that organizations need to think about is aligning deployment planning with release planning and readiness planning, right? How do we engage our stakeholders to figure out things like what their tolerances for change are, how we ensure that we're not just deploying changes to technology, but we're thinking about process implications, people and roles and responsibilities, and the organization's overall culture and their tolerance to change. So as we start thinking about deploying capabilities faster and faster, we do have to think about how and when and why is this useful for the customer in their context, and what are the packages of capabilities that taken together make meaningful differences from a business standpoint.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, panel. And Etienne, a really pertinent question there about trying to, not necessarily to move at the pace of the slowest soldier, but to make sure that whatever pace it is that you're setting, if it's a marathon, it needs to be sustainable over the period of that transformation. So do bear that in mind when, you know, setting out and setting expectations across the enterprise. Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Shanice, if we can, we're going to move on. I do see lots of different people who are online, so thank you very much. We do have a couple of little technical problems today that we're trying to iron out as well, but there's some great contributions coming in. I can see Julian online. I can see Arlene online again. So welcome back, Arlene. And also I think it's Adrienne as well, although it's actually kind of not quite clear to me at the moment, but I will figure that out in a few moments or so. Shanice, let's move on. We'll take our next question.
We've got a live question from Charlotte in Cornwall. If I'm an agile practitioner and I have lots of experience in delivering change projects, does this make me an agile change agent?
Dianne, start us off, please.
Okay, so having this experience can certainly contribute to being an agile change agent. However, there are some additional qualities, for example, effective listening skills, and also because agile transformation impacts on many different aspects of an organization, for example, HR, systems, processes. It's also important that the agile change agent would have diversified knowledge as well, so that they can apply this technical capacity and capability to the change transformation.
Yeah, absolutely right. And those other attributes are so important because they convert you from being somebody who is a bit of a change barrier, all right, into somebody who is a change enabler. And that's the whole point of the agency element of it. Farah, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Falko.
Well, Charlotte, that's definitely assets that you're having right now. I mean, by having this experience in Agile as well as in change projects. So what I would add to what Dianne has just said is that an Agile Change Agent is someone that is meant, I would say, to support the teams in their Agile journey by mobilizing them to participate in the change. So if you feel like you have all the skills to go on, just go in there, test your skills, feel if there is anything that is missing within your experience that you need to, let's say, acquire, like empathy, like active listening, as Dianne was mentioning earlier. But that's definitely an asset that can help you into progressing into getting that role in the company that you work for currently.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Falko?
You mentioned two of your assets in your question, being able, as a good person delivering change projects, as well as having experience in agile way of working. But if you combine them, that's one of the steps. So agile way of working, agile improvement, iterative approaches in changes, small steps, adding on the last question as well, bringing things together in a way that the change load is not too much over time. So keeping the bits of change over time constant, maybe in a rhythm, as was mentioned as well, is a helpful basis. But also keep in mind that change agent is a person driving the change. So if you don't drive it, you're also not a change agent. And there comes to mind the change agent, from my point of view, is also someone who knows the rules, knows when to break them and when to create new ones together with the people following them.
Thank you so much indeed. It's an interesting question panel, really, isn't it? It's how much of a rebel should we be? Should we always follow these methods kind of, almost religiously, like a kind of, with a degree of zeal that says you never, ever, ever, deviate from the true path? Or is it really for us as change agents to think about what is more relevant for my situation, what is more relevant for my organization, and picking the best bits. So Patrick, do you recommend a kind of, quality street tin of chocolates approach of always looking for the green triangles or the purple ones and picking out those things which are most relevant for your organization? Or do you go all in method, don't deviate?
One of my consulting partners uses the phrase confident humility to describe her approach to driving agile change. And you want to describe confidence and you want to build confidence among your stakeholders. You want to be able to show them what's in it for them and to explain to them how and where and why this is going to help deliver meaningful results. But you also have to bring a humility to your thinking that we simply don't know all of the things that we're going to know. And so being open-minded, creating lots of opportunities for feedback and inclusion will help you not only deliver a better result, but get better buy-in from your stakeholder.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, when we're thinking about these things, this morning I was writing one of the newsletters actually for Level Up to send them out to folks who subscribe to that. And we have getting on for 1,000 subscribers now, just to the kind of weekly episode lists and these sorts of things. And one of the thoughts that struck me, the analogies, was actually having seen William Shatner this week, the actor, who of course played Captain Kirk. And if you think about the team that was built, it was diverse, it was inclusive, you had different specialisms, you had a doctor who was looking after people's emotional and physical well-being, you had logical and emotional decision-making taking place, and you had a leader who was willing to talk to the engine room just as much as he was willing to talk to the people in the C-suite on the bridge alongside him. So quite an interesting little analogy for us to consider, especially when things come at you very quickly that you didn't see on your long-range scanner, so to speak. All right, very good. Let's move on and we'll take our next question, Shanice.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Julian, YouTube viewer. How do we assist organizations to understand change management and agile jargon? As practitioners, we know what we know, but how do we educate the others?
The others in inverted commas as well. Fantastic. Let's really kind of think about this, because bringing our whole organizations with us is such a key element, isn't it? Farah, start us off, please, and then we'll hear from Falko.
I really like such kind of questions, because every time it makes me think of the concept of learning by doing. I mean, there are a lot of trainings that will help people acquire vocabulary, acquire jargon and new concepts. But you will never learn as much as when you're trying something for the first time. I mean, through simulations, through serious games or something. So usually what I come up with new organizations that are shifting to Agile and to a new way of dealing with projects and with change is by starting with a serious game like a Lego for Scrum or something that would make their, let's say, they are like hands on the new concept. They quickly understand what an iteration is. They quickly understand what a Scrum Master role is, what a product owner is. And it's always, let's say, better than just showing slides and showing new concepts. It will stick into their minds and they will remember this case every time there is something that they need to illustrate or something that they need to share. So my key advice in here would be learning by doing rather than just having some, let's say, not concrete trainings.
Yeah, absolutely right. That whole experience and the immersion in the experience is really how we do, take things in and remember them. Thank you so much indeed, Farah. Let's move on. Falko and then Dianne, please.
Yeah, I really like the approach of simulations and learning by doing. That works best if you have someone guiding or facilitating this who knows, has experience, and brings this together to the people who he's playing or simulating or learning with. It could be a good trainer who knows the theory as well as the practice and has some coaching and maybe even consulting experience from other organizations, bringing that along with a good organized or prepared simulation. And both together is kind of a good approach. And going back to the question, how do we know what the people we educate know? And yeah, my answer to that part of the question would be ask them and listen.
Yeah, indeed. That involvement is such an important element of it all, isn't it? Dianne, your thoughts, then we'll hear from Patrick.
So one of the ways in which we can educate is informing the organization about the principle of Agile, which is that of an Agile culture, in which the Agile teams are given a lot more autonomy in the way that they approach issues, that although the goal may come from the C-level executive to the Agile team, there is a lot more autonomy in the team to solve issues.
Thank you so much. Patrick, your thoughts, please?
So in many cases, senior executives understand the ideas and the concepts under Agile, but they might use different language. In the United States, for example, many boards of directors and senior executives understand this as a concept called VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It was coined 12 years ago by the U.S. Army War College. And the more important idea here is that we simply don't know all the things that we'd like to. So when we start thinking about how to educate people in what Agile means for them, right, we have to think about how we provide them information, how they can use this to improve their visibility, to give them better quality feedback. And we describe not as much about what the techniques are as in why they are useful in the context of helping them make better decisions and provide better feedback to the teams so that we can deliver better results for them.
Okay, thank you so much. Louisa, your thoughts, please?
So I actually want to challenge this, Julian, as to whether the others actually need to know this jargon. Sometimes I think we try to force upon people to learn a lot of this stuff when it might not be necessary for them to actually learn it. If it's a piece of communication, they're just targets at the end and they need to get a comms piece out. We don't need to explain sprints and squads and all these extra jargon to them because they don't need it. When we're getting our updates from Microsoft, from Google's, from Apple's, we don't know how they work. They definitely work in agile ways of working, and they definitely have their change management practices, but they're not forcing those type of jargon upon us. They want to keep it as simple as possible. So we also got to decide, is it actually necessary for them to learn these jargons?
I think you make a really, really good point there. You know, if you're involved in something and you need the terminology for clear and concise communication, then fine, embrace it. If you've ever worked with, and Patrick mentioned, you know, the US Armed Forces there, if you've ever worked with military people, they love an acronym. They really do. And so it's helpful if you're steeped in that environment. If you're not, it makes little sense and just causes even more confusion. So Louisa makes a really good point. Take on the role and responsibility to think, do I really need to share this beyond the immediate team? Or could I just simply deal with the outcomes of that work rather than revealing all of the little steps, you know, and the jargon and the method, if you like, that leads up to that point? So really good thinking. And what an excellent question. Thank you so much indeed, Gillian, for asking it. Shanice, if we can, let's move on, panel. I think we've got time to fit in possibly 3 more questions, but we will need to move at some pace now.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Abby. What are the main challenges faced by change practitioners in an agile environment?
So main challenges, panel, what would you think are the key ones? So let's start us off, perhaps one each. Dianne and then Farah, please.
So I would like to contribute a lack of communication, which is important to ensure that everyone, all the stakeholders, are aware of what is happening.
Okay, thank you very much. So get the comms really right. Farah, your main challenge?
I would say being able to share responsibility for driving the change, because in agile environments, you will not be on your own. There is the agile teams. There are a lot of other stakeholders that are in the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm going to jump in and offer one, and then we'll hear from Patrick. So my thinking for you would be, one of the challenges is really to enable others at the pace at which they need help. Okay, to provide that enabling function, because you'll often be working with a number of groups in parallel rather than necessarily in series. Patrick, your thoughts on main challenges?
So one thing I see a lot of is, do we have clearly articulated visions that we're working against? How frequently do we need to provide people feedback and inputs in ways that are more iterative, where things are changing more dynamically, right? As a traditional change practitioner, you may have a clearer and more detailed level of communication you can offer earlier in the project lifecycle. As you work in a more agile approach, the focus has to be much more on two-way communications and reiterating and keeping people focused on the vision you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Louisa, final thoughts on this?
I think the golden thing is time. To bring people on the change journey, you need a lot of time. And in an agile environment, sometimes you just don't have that luxury.
It happens a great deal, doesn't it? I think we've all worked on projects where if you had more time, you would have done a different and possibly a better job. But it's always the feeling that you would do a better job. But perhaps it would have just been different if you had more time. So it's just thinking about that and trying to see what can you do in the time that is made available to you. Very good. Thank you very much. What a great question. Thank you so much, Abby, for putting it to the panel. Shanice, if we may, let's take our next question.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Cindy. Is there a framework of activities and processes required to manage agile change initiatives?
Okay, so here's a starter for 10 on some frameworks or something that can really help you out. I would encourage you, Cindy, to go and have a look at the Agile Change Agent course from APMG. It does lead to a qualification, and there are various levels available for you to consider. But it will really dovetail into this world very, very sweetly indeed. Falko, your thoughts, and then we'll hear from Dianne.
I think there is not necessarily a requirement for someone to have certification or a framework or whatever, but it helps. So whenever you know what you're doing, whenever you have a plan or have an overview, then it makes it easier for the change agent. You don't have to learn that much on the change, but you can bring it, facilitate, and organize it. What I often like in change processes, for example, to look at the 8 steps of change in Kotter's books, for example. That's usually a good guideline, thinking about what is the vision, communicating it correctly with the guiding coalition in place, starting off with small wins and then extending it into the whole organization, and finally anchoring it in the culture kind of thing usually helps to have as a background.
Thank you very much indeed. Dianne, final thoughts?
One of the frameworks that can be utilized is the Agile Project Management Framework, which is an iterative approach looking at the project management lifecycle. And it's also very interesting because it looks at the traditional aspects with modern requirements to ensure that your Agile transformation is successful.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And that blend of, traditional and agile is usually the sweet spot that we all find ourselves in. We're all somewhere in these projects and programs on a spectrum of activity. So really worthwhile. Shanice, I think we've got time to fit in 2 last questions. Panel, on your toes, if you could be.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Charles. What are some key ways you can help build buy-in for agile change?
Building buy-in. Now, actually, this could take us 3 or 4 days to answer this because there's a gazillion ways of helping out to really build buy-in. Let's start off with Farah, and then we'll hear from Patrick.
Well, that's really a great question because buy-in is, let's say, a game changer when it comes to agile change. So you can, for example, share what you expect from people, what are the new ground rules. You can organize any workshops so that your team can build a common change management approach, so having hands-on. You can, at the end, collect and analyze, let's say, feedback from all the stakeholders that are involved and adjust the way of working accordingly. The idea being to be at the center of your team and to understand what they understood from your way of working, from the ground rules, and to get to adjust everything according to their needs. Not just let's say, providing a vision, providing a strategy, and applying it with blind eyes.
Thank you so much indeed. Really good advice there. Patrick, your thoughts?
So you might want to begin by not assuming that you have it. When you're first engaging your stakeholders, how well do we really understand how they really feel about the change, how they perceive it affects them, their work teams, their ability to serve their customers, and to emphasize that the Agile approaches provide meaningful opportunities for feedback and learning and engagement so that they cannot just be receivers of the change, but actual real participants in perhaps even making meaningful changes themselves in ways that help deliver a better result. So it creates a better engagement model, and people generally are more willing to buy in when they feel like their legitimate concerns have a real voice and a real opportunity to be engaged.
I think that is so important. And in my experience, in my early career, where it was much more, very long programs, multi-site, multi-country rollouts of, implementations of ERP systems and this kind of thing that seemed to go on for decades rather than for, months, if you like. And in that situation, people simply didn't feel that they could influence what was happening next. Whereas in an agile environment, if you're getting it right, people are much closer to how things happen. And you do have that opportunity presented multiple times to be able to engage people. But you have to, I would say, explain, don't sell. And when you're explaining, listen actively to what people are saying, okay? Because if you're just explaining, then actually that's not that helpful. You need to be able to receive and communicate back as well and be that bridge, all of the time, the catalyst for change, the agent for change. The clue is in the title. Very good. Excellent. Thanks so much, panel. Super quick, Shanice, time for one last question.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. So we've got a question from Sophia. What would be the key ways by which agile change in virtual environments can be made effective?
All right, panel. Your thoughts then on the key ways in which virtual environments can be made effective for agile change. Dianne, how would you go about this?
So you can utilize some of the more collaborative tools, for example, Slido, as well as deepen your relationship with your stakeholders via the use of video interactions.
Thank you very much indeed. Some great collaboration tools actually available online as well. So Patrick, and then we'll hear from Farah.
So while I agree there are a lot of good collaboration tools, we shouldn't use that as a substitute for engaging people. Even if the group is largely decentralized and virtualized, there are still opportunities for face-to-face communication, and most especially for creating a meaningful sense that the communication is two-way. Right? One of the risk factors in a virtual environment, especially when you're dealing with cultures where people don't want to turn on their cameras, for example, where it feels like a radio program rather than a real discussion. And so it's an extremely important part of this to help people think about how they want to share their information so that they can be a real part of the change journey.
Thank you so much indeed. Excellent. Farah and then Falko, super quick.
2 points for me. First, try to set short-term goals so that you have the opportunity to assess the results and then to adjust your way of working. And second, be crystal clear. So repeat, enable Q&A sessions so that people can share their concerns or the ideas or what they have in mind.
Thank you so much. And Falko?
So if you have virtual environments, make sure that it's a remote first approach, that everyone, even though if some people sit together in a room, are on the same level, so that there are no gaps between different people communicating in different ways. If you set up something like a hybrid environment, I just talked with a few release train engineers the last days. They plan a very big PI planning in a safe environment for several hundred people in a big location. Try to use those events to build trust, to build community, to build a feeling whenever that's possible. Kind of what Patrick said. If there is a virtual first environment, use every chance that you have to get people together to build things like a community, to build understanding, and have as much face-to-face communications in place as possible. But there are replacements. You can use tools as much as possible to support the remote way of working. So tools as Slido, as online boards, Mural is usually helpful for visualizing things. And video cameras. Be a good example. Switch your camera on and let people higher in the hierarchy as possible follow you or make this as example as well. It's spreading.
Thank you so much indeed. Yeah, thank you so much, Falko. Setting a good example really does actually make an enormous difference. It's remarkable how if you improve how you sound and how you look on your video calls, the senior people will start asking you, how do you do that? What camera are you using? How does that work? All right. People will come to you and they'll start asking, and then they'll be proud to switch on their cameras, and one soon begets the other. All right. Very good. So, we're going to come to social in a few moments. We have had some technical issues today, but I'm going to read you some highlights, panel. But let's start off with closing remarks from the panel, if we can. Louisa, if I may, I'll come to you first, and then Falko.
I think for people, it's just be bold, be brave, and be the change you want to be.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Be the change that you want to be. Excellent advice there. Falko, your thoughts, please, your closing remarks, and then we'll hear from Dianne.
Yeah, keep change going, go in small steps, make it over time, and don't overload people with the change initiatives that you try to achieve.
Thank you so much. Dianne, and then Patrick.
Very interesting questions, very interesting show. And every show I always learn something. And today, one of the quotes that I'll take away is that of confident humility. So thank you to my fellow panelists.
Yeah, it was a really good one, that, wasn't it? Thank you so much indeed. Thank you, Dianne. Patrick, your closing remarks, please, and then Farah.
We're living in a time of enormous change, and it's not likely to get any better. It, in fact, is almost certainly going to get worse. So the work of Agile Change Agents is not only critical today, it will become very fundamental to any organization being successful.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Farah, your closing remarks, then we'll hear from Shanice.
So if you want to be an Agile Change Agent, there are a lot of qualities that you need to foster and to focus on. I would say humility, the ground mindset, a yes and mindset, and to try to be present for people and to be a good listener.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Shanice, been a very interesting episode today. Your thoughts, please.
This has been so interesting. The questions that we've had have really kept people on their toes, but they've been so interesting, and hopefully the audience have got a lot of insights and benefits out of all your fantastic answers. So thank you so much, panel, and thank you, viewers, as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, over on social, I can tell you, although we couldn't quite get the technology working on our side today, we've had some amazing contributions panel. Chris Kelly, who works in the areas of project management and digital health and leadership and so on. It's been a great contribution from Chris throughout the session, saying thank you, everybody. Really good session. Get that messaging out early, methods to fit the needs of the organization, and a feedback loop is integral for stakeholders to back up the project teams. Tom Barnard Barnadiston, I think, Tom. Sorry about that, tripping over your name. Agile jargon is such a big issue these days. If we want to get project management representation at the executive level, we need to sort this out. And I think it was Louisa, if I was right in memory, kind of saying, maybe you don't need to share all the jargon. As my grandmother would have said at one stage, preserve a little mystery in that, okay? Make the complex appear straightforward and simple, if I can paraphrase her. Tom is also a great advocate for the practice framework as well. So some really great contributions from everybody in the audience today, and apologies for not being able to pop them up on the screen as they were happening. Let's look forward then, if we can, to what's coming up in Level Up next. So thank you very much, everybody, for, of course, joining us on these sessions on Mondays and Fridays. Over on our website, you can search for answers now to more than 1,500 questions. It's a really comprehensive resource to connect you with so many experts from around the world. On Monday the 14th, we're going to be discussing why certification matters so much in a recession, before exploring techniques about helping you to deliver twice the value in half the time to your organization. And that will be, of course, on Friday, the 18th of November. Subscribe to the show and we'll send you a personal summary of what's happening and how you too can level up your career with APMG. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye for now.